Well, economics is rather interesting. I mean, it's always prided itself on being extremely worldly. You can pride yourself on being worldly as opposed to being godly, you understand? Um, and, well, in particular, in being a science, namely that, okay, your theory is very interesting, but does it work? In other words, is it useful? And not only that, is it useful more or less, but optimally so? In other words, it's not necessarily worth my improving the situation more and more because I've got other better things to do with my time and energy and resources. So we have a notion of optimality in a world in which there is good and bad, if you like. It's not all rosy. And we're trying to make things better, and the better is more or less better than its alternatives. So, for instance, we have the notion of the real cost of doing something is what we call the opportunity cost. What opportunity will be foregone in order to achieve this? That's the cost, because if I do this, I can't do that instead. So I know the cost of this, and in some sense doing this is a benefit because it's preferred to doing that. So the cost of doing this is the benefit that I lose in doing that, and there's a gain in doing this, which you might think of as profit or surplus, or the gain from the transaction, or the choice being made for this instead of that. So in living here, we are constantly optimizing, never achieving some pure form of bliss, but rather achieving improvements on what would otherwise be. And in that sense, it's therefore a good idea to do a certain thing, because it will be an improvement. In other words, the cost will be less than the gain. If the cost is equal to the gain, well, there's no point in doing it, is there? You know, I mean, we're no better off by definition. But do you see, if we think of the Plato pure forms, we might think, ideally it's a good idea to do A, say. But in fact, in practice, there's all sorts of unknowns and difficulties there. It might be better for us to settle for B. B is known. It doesn't look on, in theory, in pure form, to be quite as good as option A, but there are things we don't know about option A, so I think we'll stick with B, shall we? In other words, we're optimizing all the time. We're not achieving bliss, and indeed the world's always complaining, isn't it? Because it's not doing better than what was hoped, or what in pure form can be visualized by whoever it is that's complaining. And they're saying, well, we could be doing so and so, the cost is less than the gain. And the decision maker may actually say, well, we're not clear that it is, we think it's the other way around, or there's other things we've got to take into account. In other words, it's not a pure form world. It's much more complicated than your pure theory. The assumptions of your theory, well, you need to have much more complex assumptions to have an accurate model of reality, if you like, that we're facing in the world. And your pure forms actually may not be so pure because, they're conceived by man and man is a child. He doesn't know everything. He gets things wrong and he goes charging off after all sorts of fancies and then recoils after some experience of such. So the Platonic view of pure forms is arguably a sort of, it's wrong to say tangible, but a sort of firm way of stating that in our thoughts we have a certain we can have at least a certain apparent purity, but in practice it doesn't turn out to be quite so easygoing as we thought. Yeah. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.